I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, free recycled water for thirsty lawns, where you can find the filling station and how much water you can take away.
The new Common Core standards have been put to the test. I'm Peggy Pico with the first statewide results and what the scores mean in San Diego. Plus, another legal challenge to Navy Broadway redevelopment project is resolved. What design concessions were made and why opposition is worried about the site being a potential terrorist target.
But alas, I'm a portraitist who can only record what I see. I can't make people more beautiful.
Before Photoshop, painting portraits of Hollywood royalty, the partner who helped him pursue his artistic dreams. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. San Diego police released the results of a study looking at the first year of having officers wear body cameras. KPBS reporter Steve Walsh has the latest on the study.
A year after more than 800 of its officers were outfitted with body cameras, police say overall citizens' complaints against officers are down 23%. Total use of force by police is up 10%. It's a turnaround from the first 6 months of the program when both complaints and incidents of force by police had dropped. Police Chief Shelley Zimmerman says there could be a couple of reasons why officers reported using more overall force. One could be that officers wearing body cameras are more likely to report it.
The other is really how we're trained, is to get more resources to the scene. So instead of one officer there that might have to use a greater amount of force to control that situation, if we can get more officers there to slow the situation down.
Instances of the highest level of force have gone down, which could mean using more officers did de-escalate some incidences. The police chief continues to defend the department's position that it will not release to the public the video from police body cameras. To date, 871 officers have been issued body cameras. The city has the resources to equip up to 1,000 officers. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Outside right now, hot and muggy. There's a heat wave roasting San Diego as slow-moving storms and humidity add to sweltering conditions. A heat advisory now covers the coast and valley areas until tomorrow night. There is also a flash flood watch for the mountain and desert areas. San Diego Gas and Electric wants people to resist the urge to flip on the AC. There's a reduce your use incentive program allowing customers to earn credit for cutting back on power. Again, we are bracing for possible thunder, lightning, and rain later this week. Upper 80s, we're well above normal at the beaches. Upper 80s there, upper 90s for the inland valleys. More rain expected in the mountain areas with 80s there, and scorching triple digits in the desert. Free water for thirsty lawns. The San Diego Water District making it easy for customers to get recycled water for their lawns. It can be used on landscaping, but the water isn't clean enough to drink. The Olivenhain Water District opened up its first filling station in the 4S Ranch neighborhood today.
Our customers can get 300 gallons free recycled water to use in their front and backyards to hopefully save the trees and the special ornamental landscape that they have, because we know that their conservation efforts have been huge.
The station is the first of its kind in the county. The district may open another station in Encinitas if the response is good. Student passwords, login names, and sexual identity were among the personal information exposed at 8 California State University campuses. LA Times says the data breach affects nearly 80,000 students enrolled in a state-required sexual violence prevention course online. Now, these are the schools affected, including San Diego State. An investigation is underway, and students were told to change their passwords. The State Department of Education released the first results of its Common Core testing today. Peggy Pico tells us how students in San Diego performed.
Results from the new standardized test released today found most California students fell below grade level and are not academically prepared for college. Joining me with what the results mean for San Diego's largest school district is San Diego Unified School District Superintendent Cindy Martin. And Cindy, expectations were kind of low for this first-time results. How did San Diego Unified students do on the new test?
Well, you're right about that. They were kind of low. So they came out, when you have low expectations, we came out higher than what we were thinking. We had 51% of our students meeting or exceeding these new college and career-ready standards in English language arts and 41% in math. Now, that's not super exciting because you know that's not everybody yet, but that's higher than what we anticipated for the first time with this brand new assessment.
And how do we compare then the school district to other districts in the state?
Good question. We compare ourselves to, first of all, the large urban districts, and when you look at the other large urbans, LA Unified, Long Beach, San Francisco Unified, San Diego Unified is second in the state compared to large urbans. Only San Francisco Unified was 1 percentage point higher in English language arts. They had 52% of their students meeting or exceeding. In English language arts, we had 51, and then in math, we had 41% meeting or exceeding, and they had, I think it was 46 or 47%. So San Francisco Unified was first in the state among the large urbans. We were second. Then in the county, when you compare San Diego County schools, we were San Diego Unified exactly at the county average in English language arts, and 1 percentage point above in math.
And just for comparison, I believe California, the numbers were 44%.
Yes.
Were at grade level for English, and just about 34% in math.
So San Diego Unified definitely beat the
statewide standards.
Absolutely.
What does standardized test measure?
This new assessment is called the SBAC, the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, and it's assessing the new Common Core state standards. And people have a lot of confusion. What does that actually mean? The Common Core standards essentially helps us look at how we're making sure students are college and career ready and they're able to think critically. That's the heart of it, is critical thinking, meaning you're not just the old California standards test was bubble in, where you had a multiple choice and you just picked an answer. You don't really have to think critically. You can guess an answer on that. For the SBAC, you actually have to reason, you have to show your work, you have to explain your thinking, and that's what critical thinking is all about. And it really comes from the world of work saying we want employees, if you're going to be career ready, you need to think. You can't just just have an answer and pick an answer and guess. You have to think rationally and be able to defend your answers for things.
I know the results just came out this morning, but what do they tell you about the students, the teacher, or core curriculum, or is it too soon to tell anything?
Well, we have to remember this is a baseline year. As we're transitioning, the state of California, and in fact the whole nation is transitioning how we use assessment for accountability purposes. This is one assessment. The results that came out today is one assessment in a suite of assessments that we're using to help us know how our students are doing. And San Diego Unified has been committed to children being more than a test score, and that we have invested in the whole child. And so there's other measures that we're using to know how our kids are doing as well.
How will the district use these test scores?
Baseline year, we're going to look at any kind of programmatic decisions. Won't be making major changes, because how do you make a major change on a baseline year? We'll see some patterns and trends. We saw some bright spots. We have some disappointments. We have some exciting spots, but it's too hard to tell when you're just looking at 1 year. So we're not going to make major changes off of an assessment that actually there's some critics out there that are saying, is this assessment even valid? Is it reliable? Does it really predict? And so you're looking at lots, there's far right, far left opinions about what this test is and what it isn't.
That being said, are parents able to look at the scores?
Parents will be getting individual student score reports so they can look at the scores, but once again, we don't want anybody overreact. If you overreact to a standardized test, you're going to end up in a place you don't want to be. If you underreact, you're not paying attention to an accountability measure. That's one in a suite.
Well, I know that San Diego schools now have local control of funding from the state. So will these test results actually impact how that money or where that money is spent?
No, when the local control funding formula is connected to the local control accountability plan. Inside that accountability plan, we've identified as a local community what are our priorities, what do we want to spend our money on, and how are we going to measure and know how we're doing. You can't mandate what matters. And these assessments are not the end-all, be-all of what we're doing in the local control accountability plan. They're just one small little part of it.
All right, we'll continue to follow this. Superintendent Cindy Martin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A judge has dismissed a lawsuit against San Diego State University and KPBS media partner INews. The suit involved lease agreements, but the judge ruled it was also about the ability to report the news. INews reporter Chris Young joins us to explain. Chris, I mentioned the issue of leases. What else was this lawsuit about?
A local nonprofit group called San Diegans for Open Government sued iNewsSource and San Diego State University in April. The lawsuit specifically challenged the legality of 2 lease agreements between the university and the news organization. Under those agreements, iNewsSource shares office space and resources with KPBS here on the university's campus. In return, KPBS receives all of iNewsSource's news stories. But San Diegans for Open Government claimed the leases were illegal because they were tainted by conflicts of interest.
And how did iNewsSource respond to those claims?
iNewsSource argued that the lawsuit wasn't about a lease at all, but rather it was an effort to silence iNewsSource's reporting. For months, the news organization has published stories critical of attorney Corey Briggs. Briggs frequently represents San Diegans for Open Government in lawsuits against government agencies and developers. iNewsSource argued that the group's lawsuit was nothing more than a frivolous attack on press freedom. In its motion, iNewsSource invoked a California law that allows meritless claims to be thrown out if they infringe upon free speech rights.
And Chris, what did the judge have to say about this?
The judge dismissed the lawsuit in its entirety. He agreed with iNewsSource that its reporting was protected by the state law. More specifically, the judge didn't buy the argument from San Diegans for Open Government that said the lawsuit was strictly about lease agreements. The judge stressed that the lease agreements in dispute were inextricably linked to iNewsSource's reporting.
So where do we go from here?
An attorney representing San Diegans for Open Government in this case could not be reached for comment. Briggs also did not return phone calls today. But in a blog post on their website, the group disputed the ruling and said that it plans to file an appeal.
iNewsSource reporter Chris Young. A bill to allow terminally ill people in California to end their lives legally passed the state assembly today and now heads to the Senate. It would allow doctors to prescribe life-ending medication to patients. A similar measure stalled earlier this year, but the Senate is expected to endorse it. It comes after a Southern California woman with brain cancer moved to Oregon last year to legally take her life. Governor Brown was opposed to considering the bill during the state's special session on health care. Its officials, state senators, have confirmed the new leader of the agency in charge of regulating utility rates and services around the state. They say Michael Picker is moving the California Public Utilities Commission in the right direction. More demands for accountability and transparency from the PUC. Some Sacramento lawmakers want to create a new inspector position. This person would ensure the agency operates legally and would report to the state auditor's office. Lawmakers say the fallout from the San Onofre power plant shutdown could have been avoided if agency operations were more public.
There's this culture within the PUC of a lack of transparency. A lot of the decisions are often made even before there's public testimony, for example.
The bill now goes for a vote on the Senate floor later this week. Sailing into San Diego, cruise ship season kicked off today with the arrival of more than 2,000 passengers aboard the Celebrity Cruises Infinity. Stopping in the harbor as part of a 9 Pacific coastal cruise, our 9-day, 65 cruise ships are actually scheduled to dock here. Now each one generates an estimated economic impact of about $2 million. San Diego Chargers regular season begins on Sunday, but the team won't legally have to pay its cheerleaders minimum wage until January 1st. State Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez wrote the bill requiring cheerleaders earn $10 an hour. She says the team should start paying cheerleaders now.
It doesn't cost a lot of money for these billion-dollar owners to treat women with the same dignity and respect that you treat the guy selling you beer.
A spokesman for the Chargers referred the question of whether the team would pay its cheerleaders at the start of the season to a third-party contractor. The company did not return our calls. The proposed waterfront Naval Complex in downtown San Diego cleared another legal hurdle. Peggy Pico shows us what the revised plan looks like and why opposition to it may be crumbling.
After years in court, the $1.25 billion proposed redevelopment of 12 acres of San Diego's prime waterfront real estate is one step closer to being built. Developer Doug Manchester's Pacific Gateway development project for the Navy Broadway complex was approved by the California Coastal Commission last week. The commission's lawsuit was dropped after Manchester agreed to change some parking and public access for the 8-block complex of office, hotel, retail, and public space at Broadway and Harbor Drive. Here with the details on the one remaining lawsuit and possible next steps are Perry Deely, President and CEO of Deely Development and Project Executive for the Gateway Development, and KPBS reporter Allison St. John, who's been covering the story for many years. And Allison, the battle over this redevelopment area across from the Midway Museum has been going on for quite some time. Put this into context for us. How did it all start?
Okay, well, the buildings that are there now were built in 1920, which is actually when the city gave that land to the Navy and said, this is your land. And at that time, it was docks downtown. It was not the downtown that we know now. Then in the 1980s, the Congress decided to try an experiment and let the Navy go into a public-private partnership to develop this land in return for building them a new Navy regional headquarters. So they actually had a competition, and Doug Manchester is the developer who won that competition.
And that brings me to this question. So it's this 8 blocks that actually the Navy owns, and a lot of people do ask, how is it that Doug Manchester got involved? So he won a bid, and what's the Navy getting out of it, and what's the city getting out of it?
Okay, so that was in 2006. So Doug Manchester gets to make a profit on this extremely desirable piece of land. Some would say perhaps the most desirable piece of coastal property in Southern California for 99 years. And in return, he will build a new headquarters for the Navy for free. So that is where the Navy benefits. They get themselves a new free regional headquarters right in the middle of downtown.
Okay, and let me ask you this, Perry. The Coastal Commission dropped this suit after some development concessions were made. Tell us about some of the changes that were made.
Well, first, that was a long process from when we were working with the Coastal Commission. So they were very passionate and involved with all of the visitor-serving public amenities that this project was going to yield in comparison to what's there now. Right now, there's 8 blocks of blighted property, chain link fence. There's an E, F, and G Street are not connected. So it walls off really the bay from downtown. So what the Coastal Commission wanted was us to put a lot of effort into visitor-serving amenities. So we've added retail, restaurants. You can go down there and get coffee. You can sit down and have an ice cream. There'll be bakeries all along Harbor Drive. We'll have outdoor public seating. So, and then we put the museum on our property, 40,000 square foot museum, right across from the Midway Aircraft Carrier Museum. So there's a compatibility, synergy. We may have a maritime museum, we may have a military, we may have a combination of museums, but that synergy is going to really enhance and reinforce the whole North Embarcadero.
Okay, let me ask you this, because the Navy Broadway Complex Coalition, it's a group that opposes the project, declined to comment for this interview, but they did raise concerns that the new high-rise Navy headquarters would be in the middle of these hotels, open space, and a lot of tourist activity. So how are you dealing with security concerns of, as they put it, this being the Navy headquarters being a potential terrorist target?
Well, as I think it's common knowledge, the World Trade Center, which was a huge travesty and tragedy in 9/11, was in a downtown urban environment. 2 office buildings that got exploded. We expect that the project that we're building to be vibrant, active, and the Navy building itself will be in full compliance with all of the federal regulations. Now, this is a Class A office building that we're building for the Navy. Very compatible for downtown. The people that work in that building are they'll wear suits. There'll be a few senior officers that are in there. So it's a compatible, integrated environment that the Navy Class A office building will have, not only in our within the new master plan, but within the whole North Embarcadero.
And Ellison, what about the one remaining lawsuit? What's that about?
So the one remaining lawsuit is challenging it on the grounds that it violates the National Environmental Policy Act, that the permit was granted back in 1992, that the world has changed since then, as Perry referred to. There's been 9/11, and that it could now be a potential target, and so that it needs to be reconsidered before going ahead.
I see, and we have to end on this. We've just got about 15 seconds. If you can tell us in that amount of time what you think the redevelopment will do for San Diego.
It's going to be a huge transformation, not only for the public, for people that live and work downtown. It's going to add 3,500 construction jobs, over 3,000 permanent jobs, $15 million a year in TOT, $10 million a year in sales tax, and about another $10 million in visitor taxes. So the sales tax, the TOT, and the property tax is going to be over $35 million a year going into public coffers.
Okay, well, as this goes forward, I'm sure we'll be talking about this a lot more. Perry Deely and KPBS reporter Allison St. John, thank you both.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eichel on the next News Hour. A look at the people on the front lines fighting Western wildfires. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
Artist Don Bacardi has done portraits of everyone in Hollywood, from Jack Nicholson to Angelina Jolie to director Robert Altman. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone has this profile of the artist, whose portraits will be shown in San Diego for the first time.
And that's my best Ed Ruscha.
Don Bacardi's Santa Monica home is saturated with memories.
And these watercolors are by Chris's father.
Every inch of wall space is covered in artwork, the shelves stuffed with books.
This is a picture he did of me.
The house holds his past, his 33-year relationship with British writer Christopher Isherwood, and artwork he's collected through trading portraits.
In the painting, Chris is on the left, looking straight ahead.
Bacardi says it was Isherwood who convinced him early on to start drawing people.
It all came from him. I would never have become an artist if I hadn't met him.
After Isherwood died in 1986, Bacardi started sleeping here in his old writing room. Isherwood's novel Goodbye to Berlin was the basis of the musical Cabaret. He also wrote the novel A Single Man. Bacardi still paints every day in a studio above the house, this same spot where thousands of cultural figures have sat for him. Actors, writers, directors, some dating back to the 50s. A portrait of Jerry Brown hangs on the studio wall. It's all about the face, says Bacardi, who grew up in L.A. going to movies with his mother.
I think I just got, at a very early age, looking at those giant close-ups of people, I got interested in faces and how revealing they are.
He started drawing actors from photographs, but those were all retouched. Having someone sit for him was better. He could see lines and creases.
Sometimes the most interesting effects in a face are the effects that are wrought by time.
That hasn't always gone over well with his subjects.
People are gonna say things, I know.
Actor Montgomery Clift sat for Bacardi years after a horrible car accident changed his matinee idol looks. Bacardi felt Clift wanted him to restore his beauty.
Don't talk like that. But alas, I'm a portraitist who can only record what I see. I can't make people more beautiful. And in fact, it's more likely to be the reverse, because I put in everything I can see.
Isherwood was the first person to sit for Bacardi. They met on a beach in 1953.
I was 18 and he was 48.
Bacardi says he has no regrets about spending decades with a man 30 years his senior.
I've often said that my relationship from Chris saved me. Probably I would be dead by now if I hadn't had a domestic partnership. I think I had a very good chance of dying from AIDS.
Their age difference did raise eyebrows, but so did the fact that they were openly gay.
We went to a big party in Beverly Hills, and Henry Fonda was there. And he introduced himself to Chris, and I put out my hand, and he turned his back on me. That was quite a put down.
Years later, Jane Fonda asked Bacardi to do a portrait of her father, who was near the end of his life. Bacardi says he was nervous.
If he remembered that occasion, he didn't mention it. And why should he? It was years before. And also, I think partly due to Jane, his attitude had changed. And he sat as well for me as anybody ever sat.
Bacardi guesses he's made over 10,000 portraits in his life. 25 of those will be on view in San Diego at the Southwestern College Art Gallery. The only time he stopped working was in the 6 months leading up to Isherwood's death. Bacardi canceled all of his sittings. He only drew Isherwood.
Sometimes, even in the last weeks when he was often almost delirious or sleeping or very vague, occasionally he would really come to himself and be alive like he had been. And that was very exciting. And of course, I was drawing as fast as I could to catch it, you know.
Bacardi did 447 drawings of Isherwood in those 6 months.
Here I was looking at this man I'd known all those years so intimately and identifying with him to the point that it seemed like dying was something we were doing together. And the result is I'm not nearly as frightened of my own death because of that experience.
Angela Carone, KPBS News.
This story just into our newsroom. An ambitious plan to cut energy use in California suffered a blow at the state capitol today. Governor Jerry Brown and Democratic leaders announced plans to scale back Senate Bill 350. Senate President Pro Tem says he's dropping the proposal to cut petroleum use by half. Governor Brown has made climate change the centerpiece of his final tenure. He said at a news conference that lawmakers did not cave in to calls to scale back state authority to set emission standards. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.